This is Joan Mir, and in 2020 he won the MotoGP World Championship with just one win. And he's the only rider in history to have the same number of wins as championships. How's that even possible? Well, a lot happened in 2020, which led to one of the weirdest titles in MotoGP history. And I'm going to break down exactly why it was so weird and how Joan Mir did the impossible. Alright, let me go through why this season was unlike any other. It will help with the rest of the video. Obviously, we know that 2020 was the height of the pandemic, something never before seen in modern history. So it was always going to be a difficult year. There were loads of race cancellations and so many people without the ability to travel, which is a little bit difficult because MotoGP is a global sport. The calendar was also changing constantly. This is what the championship was supposed to look like, which normally starts in March, and this is what it actually looked like when it started in June. With a lot of places still in lockdown, tracks like Jerez, Red Bull Ring, Aragon and Valencia all held multiple races. It was a logistical nightmare. But that doesn't take anything away from Joan Mir's talent and his championship. In fact, he was an absolute rocket on a bike, which he proved in Moto3. The general progression in the top level of motorbike racing looks something like this. First you have Moto3, then Moto2, and finally MotoGP. Some missteps altogether, but the idea is to do well in the smaller series and use it to get noticed. Mir's success was built on consistency, which is so overlooked. It's not all about just going fast. And he showed this perfectly in a record-breaking Moto3 season. Let me just give you some of the stats. Mir managed 10 wins and 13 podiums out of 18 races. He finished outside the top 10 once all season, and he won the Moto3 championship by 93 points. And he was up against some pretty big names. Aaron Canet, Jorge Martin, Fabio Di Giannantonio, and Enea Bastianini were all in the same Moto3 season. Now, there was no surprise that Mir's team, called Leopard, won the championship. But Mir scored 341 of the team's 421 points. If you only counted Joan Mir's points, his team still would have come third in the championship. So Mir was a proven rider on a bike and deserved to be in MotoGP. But the competition in MotoGP was just on another level. Although one rider wasn't in contention, which helped Mir's chances. 2020 was expected to be business as usual for one rider, fresh off of one of the most dominant seasons in MotoGP, with 12 wins and 18 podiums in just 19 races. Marc Marquez's 29 season was incredible. Unfortunately for him, 2020 was over before it began. Marc crashed early on in the first round at Jerez and gave us one of the best comeback rides we've ever seen. But with just 3 laps to go, he had a huge high side. He was thrown to the ground and then his Honda came back and smashed his arm to pieces, putting him out for the rest of the season. So all of a sudden, the title was wide open. It was anyone's game. It wasn't going to be easy though. Mir still needed to perform. So to make the season easier to understand, I'll break it down into 3 separate parts. The first 5 races weren't a great start for Mir. He had 2 DNFs in the first 3 rounds, although he did manage a podium in round 4, followed by another decent finish in round 5. But after the 5th round, he was only 8th in the championship. The rookie Fabio Quartararo was leading on the satellite Yamaha. Now we'll come back to the Yamahas in a little bit, but apart from the occasional Ducati performance, it was effectively a fight between Yamaha and Suzuki. No other team was on the same level in 2020. So, the first few races didn't look great for Mir, but over the next 4 rounds, Mir seemed to flick a switch. He managed 3 podiums on the bounce, plus a half-decent 11th place, which staggeringly put him up to 2nd in the championship after 9 rounds. Going from 8th to 2nd doesn't seem possible in 4 races, but there's a very good reason as to why. Have a look at these results from Mir versus his title rivals. No one was on the same level of consistency, and that's what paid off. The issue now was keeping up with these performances. Going into the final 5 rounds, Mir was 10 points behind Fabio Quartararo, but the Yamaha was quick, almost too quick.
Coincidence? I think not!
For some context, and to help the rest of the video make sense, let me give you a quick rundown on some of the rules that every single MotoGP team needs to follow. MotoGP engines tend to have a lifespan of around 1,000 kilometers. They can technically last longer, but teams need to tune them down for more reliability and they produce less power, so it makes sense to change them. Normally, MotoGP teams are allowed 7 engines per rider per season, but because of the shorter season in 2020, they were only allowed to use 5 engines. At the beginning of the season, every single team sends an engine off to the owners of MotoGP to get it homologated. It's just a fancy word for getting it officially approved. If a team wants to change something after the engine's been sent off, they have to ask permission from other teams and MotoGP themselves. So Yamaha sent an engine off to be approved, like everyone else did. But during the first round, the engines kept blowing up. Even though Fabio won the first race, they had lots of issues. Fabio used 4 out of his 5 engines, and Maverick Vinales used all of his engines that he had available. Even Rossi had an engine blow up. They could barely do 200 kilometers before exploding. Obviously, this was a huge issue, and Yamaha needed to investigate it fast. It turned out Yamaha started the season using different valves from what they sent off to get approved. The shape and overall design was identical, but they were made out of a slightly different type of titanium. The bigger problem they had though was not telling anyone about the different valves they used. And instead of asking to change them back, they quietly switched back over to those original valves. This was where everyone started to question what was going on with the Yamaha. They went from barely lasting 200 kilometers to being able to do easily 5 times that. So the FIM started investigating Yamaha just before the European round. They looked at the engines and found that they had swapped the valve, which meant Yamaha used illegal parts in the opening races. Normally in this situation, you'd have a huge penalty given to the manufacturer, the teams, the riders, everyone. But the FIM only penalised Yamaha and the teams, not the individual riders. So what did Yamaha do? Well, with some of the engines banned, they had to make do with what they had left for the rest of the season. They ended up lowering the RPM limits to reduce the power and try and increase the reliability. After this whole controversy, Yamaha was struggling to do anything, and it left the door wide open for Mir. And going into the European round, Mir was 14 points ahead of Fabio. Mir took his first and only win of the season after working his way up from 5th place, just finishing ahead of his teammate Alex Rins. Notice also the highest Yamaha was in 11th place in this round. But it wasn't until the penultimate round where Mir had his first chance to secure the championship. To get the title, he needed at least 7th place. He only just managed it, beating Andrea Dovizioso by 0.02 of a second. But he did it nonetheless, and to this day, Mir has the second lowest points percentage score of any MotoGP World Champion at just 48.8%. Championships aren't just decided by being fast. You need to be consistent, but you also need a little bit of luck now and again. And sometimes, no matter how good you are, luck just never goes your way. So click on this video here where I break down the unluckiest rider in MotoGP history. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one.